Greetings, digital world. Welcome back to another episode of Spliced In Later, and it's time for yet another movie review. Quite a few movies to review in the month of March. Well, with Creed and Dungeons and Dragons and Shazam. Apologies that this one is coming a little later than normal. Normally I do episodes on Tuesday, but if there's reviews for movies I want to do that week, I tend to postpone it until I've seen the movie. It is Wednesday right now as I'm recording this. I am recording it having just seen the movie we're about to talk about, so it's fresh in my mind. But the movie was 2 hours and 48 minutes, so by the time I finish with all this, it's going to be late. I got work tomorrow, I got important stuff I got to do, so I won't officially post this till probably Thursday afternoon or something. But depending where you are listening in the world and time zones, it probably doesn't matter. And depending on the future... It certainly won't matter if you listen to this 3 weeks from now. You will not care when I posted this, so it doesn't really matter. We're going to get right into it. Today, for our movie review, for the last movie I'm reviewing for the month of March, we are reviewing very highly anticipated by me and by a lot of people, John Wick Chapter 4, the fourth John Wick film in the John Wick franchise, starring Keanu Reeves as unstoppable hitman John Wick, the fourth in a movies directed by Chad Stahelski, I believe his last name is, in this crazy world of underground assassins and crazy over-the-top evil table people and neon lighting and endless waves of bad guys and just plain awesomeness. To sum it up quickly, John Wick Chapter 4 is amazing. I loved it. I didn't love it as much as John Wick 3, but it's my second favorite of all the John Wicks. And it's a strong contender for best film of the year so far, easily, which is a huge relief because this movie was supposed to come out 2 years ago, but thanks to pandemics and also the resurgence of The Matrix with The Matrix Resurrections, it took a long time for this movie to come out. It was even supposed to come out towards the end of last year before it was postponed just for a couple of months. I don't mind because it was certainly worth the wait. A bit of unpacking for John Wick. Like most things in the world, most franchises that I'm really into, I wasn't there at the very beginning. I didn't watch the original John Wick when it first came out. I didn't even watch John Wick Chapter 2 in the theaters because I heard a dog died in John Wick, and that's not for me. I struggle with animal violence in movies, even if it's fake. Don't ask me why. I can watch Game of Thrones and big battles where people get mowed down and their heads popped and all of that stuff, and it does not bother me in the slightest. You slap a dog in the face on a movie, and I will never touch that movie again if it's affected me in a certain way. So I knew that the concept of the original John Wick was that Keanu Reeves got a dog and then someone killed his dog. That was about it. But I kept being told that, oh, you've got to watch John Wick because if you can get past that, it's not only a good film, it's a reinvention of the action film genre. It's something new in a way that you haven't seen before, and there's more to it than just revenge for dog killing thing. So I bought John Wick's 1 and 2 together, and I watched them back to back, and oh boy, was I right. I mean, the first John Wick alone is a fairly standard standalone film. Doesn't really require you to watch all the other John Wicks if you don't want to. The plot is fairly simple in that Keanu Reeves is playing this guy, John Wick. He's very sad. Obviously, his wife has passed away and he's a bit lonely. When his wife died, though, she managed to somehow make sure that he got a puppy. A puppy was sent to him, which he calls Daisy. It's the sweetest little thing. Everything seems like it's going to be all right for John Wick. Except that he runs into some assholes at a gas station, one of them played by Theon Greyjoy, who follow him back to his home, beat him up, and murder his dog. Very upsetting. But oh no, the joke's on those guys because they just killed John Wick's dog. And that's where the movie gets really interesting and good, is that when people hear that they've killed John Wick's dog, the way they react to the name John Wick really establishes a sense of foreboding and intrigue into this guy, whoever Keanu Reeves is. He's a big deal in the underworld or whatever he's talking about. And then as John Wick goes on his personal vendetta to get back at these guys, he starts hooking up with old acquaintances, old people he used to work with. There's a sense of this network that lives underneath New York City that no one knows about. And probably from the moment he goes to the Continental, which is this hotel in New York run by Ian McShane's Winston and dutifully concierged by Lance Reddick's Sharon. Lance Reddick passed away recently, may he rest in peace. And John Wick drops his gold coin at the counter, and Sharon reminds him that no blood is to be spilled on Continental grounds. You're like, Jesus, this is world building. This is an entire new society and film franchise that is really being built behind the scenes of this simple revenge story thing. The action is fantastic. And then when you get to John Wick Chapter 2, what actually happened there is it starts a story which until Chapter 4 here hadn't been resolved. There were some underlying issues with the actions that John Wick took in number 1 that made him a few enemies in John Wick 2. And in order to protect himself and get back at some people and kill some real assholes, he ends up really pissing off the Table, which is like this high society that runs all the assassins and hitmen that operate throughout the world. And by the end of John Wick Chapter 2, he's declared excommunicado, which means that there's a bounty on his head and every hitman in New York, as well as probably the world, is going after him. Keep in mind as well, those first 2 movies take place over a period of a couple weeks, and John Wick's 2 and 3 collectively take place over a couple days. John Wick 3 picks up immediately after John Wick 2, throws you headlong into John Wick's desperate battle for survival, who he can trust, who's going after him, what new assassins are coming out of the woodwork. Again, building on the Continental and other Continentals and the Table and the code of honor that everyone operates by, and favors and grudges that all these people hold against each other. For instance, there's one guy going after John Wick who wants to kill him because he wants to prove himself, but he's just also starstruck because he just loves John Wick's legend and his aura and all of that so much that he's like a giddy schoolboy whenever he's fighting him. Action non-stop, the lighting as well, the neo-noirness of it looks incredible. The cinematography is fantastic. John Wick 3 is one of my absolute favorite action films of all time, and that left you with not really anything resolved. You knew that John Wick still had some heads to crack, some people to kill. He still had a long way to go if he was ever going to be free of everything going after him. So 3's credits roll, and I'm like, brilliant, bring on 4. COVID happens, all right, I'll wait until 4. But now here we are in 2023, John Wick Chapter 4 comes out. The longest in the John Wick franchise at nearly 3 hours, but certainly doesn't feel its length. Basically, without spoiling what happens in John Wick 4, but it's John Wick taking a stand. If John Wick 3 was him on the run and reacting to being excommunicado and having to deal with a relentless pursuit, this one is John Wick going, all right, I have to do something. So he takes on a more aggressive, full frontal assault against the Table and the assassins and all the people coming after him. Looking for allies, avoiding enemies. Some new characters are brought in. A brand new villain that he's got to go up against. A begrudging follower that's played by Donnie Yen, who is forced to hunt John Wick, but certainly doesn't want to do it. Plus, he's blind, which is pretty cool. We converse across the world. We meet a Japanese or Continental hotel as well. All culminating in a final showdown for John Wick to truly be free. Live or die, he will be free of the Table and everything they've got holding over him. That's basically all I can say about it, because a friend asked me could they go and watch John Wick 4 without seeing the other John Wicks, and would they understand what's going on? And to that I say, yeah, I think you would enjoy it, regardless of if you had seen any of the other John Wicks. The movie itself is so relentless and so entertaining and so interesting that you would understand enough. You would know John Wick's the good guy, these people are the bad guys, and you would have a good time. But we're so intricately into this overall arching battle that John Wick's been on for about 3 movies now that it does help to have all that information going in, because by that point you are with John Wick 100% and you want him to succeed, because the poor guy has been through it all. It's a fantastic. I loved it. I was worried at the runtime that perhaps things were getting too out of hand, but credit to the director and credit to Keanu Reeves as John Wick. The pacing in here is almost perfect. There are a couple of scenes, there may be 1 or 2, where I'm like, okay, you stretch it down a little bit. There's just one scene in particular where Ian McShane's Winston is walking in to talk to Bill Skarsgård's character, and it's just holding on him, walking along the room to him, and you can hear his footsteps going. As that was happening, I was thinking, this movie doesn't need to be as long as it is. But they are small instances, because what's worked for John Wick, what works really, really well, is it's one continuous story of John Wick's pursuit and battle to be free, but it moves from set piece to set piece. So you've got big action sequences that are very different from each other and have different stakes and different people involved. Different characters come and go. The implications come and go. So you do move along in such a way that it doesn't feel like you're just watching the same stuff over and over again. The action has a little bit of flair to it, whether it's the Japanese action sequence where it's focused more on sword fighting or an attempt to take down people in full body-clad armor, to the final thing where John Wick's in a race against time to get to a church before a certain point, and he's dodging traffic in France and working his way through buildings in one-take shots, or even just attempting to climb the longest flight of stairs I've ever seen as people just keep kicking him back down. It never lets up, but it never overstays its welcome, and you never lose interest. You are constantly just mesmerized by what you're seeing. In terms of performances, they're all great. I love Keanu Reeves as John Wick is great because it works for Keanu Reeves' range. He is either a really good comedic actor or he's a good action star. That's really it for him, I think. But with John Wick, he's found a perfect niche because John Wick says very little. Limits himself to one-word answers. When he does speak, he's always speaking in other languages, like Japanese or Russian. But for the most part, he's a man of few words. And he is over everything by this point. By the fourth film, he is tired. He is grumpy. He is exhausted from what he has to go through. And what I've said about John Wick in the past to many people, I don't think I've reviewed a John Wick before this on this show. But he is a human being. He wears these Kevlar suits that are bulletproof, so it does help him when he's being shot at and thrown into buildings and out of buildings and onto cars and all that. So he does get put through the ringer in a way that no man could normally survive. But he also doesn't walk it all off like he's a superhuman. John Wick takes down these bad guys and he has to use his wits, and he gets tired. And there are moments where he gets knocked down and he just struggles to get back up because of all the people he's had to fight through and the type of foes he's up against. And that's a sense of realism in an otherwise very unbelievable concept and story. I mean, these people are fighting at the Arc de Triomphe. Cars are mowing into all these hitmen and no one's reacting. People are just driving as if these people aren't in the road. They're sitting by the road having cups of tea and they couldn't care less about the shootout that's happening 2 feet away. So to have that alongside a very human, battered, bruised John Wick, a John Wick who has already been through 2 movies non-stop of just constant fighting, is really fun to watch. Aside from John Wick, who's very restrained and quiet, all the other actors and characters in here are very over the top in very interesting ways. So they all stand out in a way where no 2 characters are exactly the same. I was thinking watching this movie as well, that for John Wick's wide variety of characters, not many of them continue through the movies. Our consistent ones are obviously John Wick, and then you've got Ian McShane's Winston and Lance Reddick's Charon, who operate the Continental, the no man's land hotel, essentially for hitmen. Winston's always kind of like a father figure to John Wick, but he's also out for himself as well. It's all about his own survival, really. Whereas Lance Reddick is very loyal to Winston, but also I think is loyal to John Wick as well, and has more of a sense of doing the right thing over doing something for one's own personal survival. But aside from them, I mean, you had Lawrence Fishburne introduced in the second one as the Bowery King, who's like this homeless king of a network of homeless assassins, who's very larger than life. And I think it's wonderful to see Lawrence Fishburne and Keanu Reeves back on screen together after the whole Matrix thing. Or you've got John Leguizamo in the first 2 as like a chop shop operator. But aside from that, all the characters introduced in each movie are relatively stick to their movie. So the big ones we meet in 2 or 3 don't carry over. There's no Halle Berry from the third one. There's no Ruby Rose from the second one. So in that regard, again, for the fourth one here, we've got some brand new characters who instantly become fan favorites. Donnie Yen is the standout as this character called Kane, who's this blind assassin who's being coerced by the villain of the film, Bill Skarsgård, as this asshole Frenchman. In order to protect his daughter, he's being sent after Wick, but he respects Wick. He doesn't want to kill Wick. He doesn't want to kill half the people he has to go up against, but he's doing it because he has no choice. His fighting style is very interesting as well. Because he's blind, I was talking to people after this movie and I was like, you know what's really interesting is that you often have blind assassins in movies, but when they're fighting, it's like they're not blind. It's the daredevil excuse. My other senses are heightened, so even though I can't see you, I know exactly where you are, I know where you're going, so I can fight you normally. But with Donnie Yen in this film, he is blind and he has to use what's around him to even remotely be good at fighting. So like he's setting up sensors, say the bad guys will set them off and he'll be able to fight back, or he swings his sword around not necessarily to fight but just to get sense of the lay of the land so he can utilize it for his own benefits, or just to make sure he doesn't fucking bang his head when he's fighting. There are even instances where John Wick has to try and get away from him, so he just stays quiet and Donnie Yen doesn't know if he's killed him or not. It's a very interesting take, which I really, really liked. Aside from that, you've got Bill Skarsgård as a very interesting villain. Hiroyuki Sanada shows up as the Japanese Winston running his own little Continental. There's some really good stuff. Clancy Brown, Mr. Krabs, is in here as basically just the referee for this no-holds-barred beat-em-up movie. They're all really interesting, and I can't talk too much about them because it'll give away what happens to them in the movie, I guess. There's another character in here, I don't remember the actor's name, but he's like a tracker that's tracking John Wick, and he has a dog. And you know the old saying, if there's a dog in a John Wick movie, be afraid. I was constantly scared for this dog because it was not afraid to get involved in the fighting. Very stressful times for sure. Again, the direction, the action is no holds bar and it's really entertaining to watch, combined with the neo-noir style of direction with the lights and the music and the interesting shots. There's a one-take shot of John Wick just cleaning a house of bad guys, all from an overhead shot, while he's using essentially a fireball gun, which is incredibly mesmerizing to watch. And to list the scenes would be to spoil the scenes for you if you haven't seen it yet. But one particular scene I will draw mention to, which really highlights just the uniqueness of a John Wick film and a John Wick action scene, is when John Wick is chasing down a fat guy in a dance club. Just the music just completely pumping, really emphasizing the seriousness and the intensity of the situation. The flashing lights that they use from the dance club, and the smoke and the water falling from the ceiling as well, because I guess clubs can have waterfalls as well. The way the people around them are just dancing like they're going to die. It's incredibly interesting, mesmerizing shot, which really just is the perfect example of why John Wick films are so unique and so entertaining. I absolutely had a blast with this one. It was not a problem sitting through the length time. I went to a red carpet screening of this thing. They gave me some complimentary beer beforehand, which worried me because beer goes through me like a shot, and I was worried I would have to pee. But if I did have to pee, I guess I didn't notice because I was just so hooked on what's going on. It is a proper chapter 4. I think it's a good conclusion to the John Wick story. I don't know if they plan to do more after this. I don't know if they need to do more after this. But if you've been with John Wick since his dog died in 2014, or if you have been with him on this particular night that kicked off in 2017 with chapter 2, this is a very satisfying, this is the end to that struggle that John Wick's been on for almost 10 years. Very satisfying. The one of the final kills in this movie, people in my audience clapped. Don't do that. I hate people that do that. Made me upset, but I'm also just a grumpy old man, so what do I know? Gets a 9 out of 10 from me. I think Creed 3 is just a little bit ahead for me in terms of my favorite films, and that's just because of what I wanted out of Creed and what I got. Also what I got out of John Wick and what I got. But it's a solid action movie. It's a worthy addition to the John Wick franchise. Almost the best one, if number 3 just wasn't that little bit better for me personally. But again, it's your preference on what works for you in a John Wick film and what type of action and characters and anything you're looking for. I think if you asked anybody what's your favorite John Wick film and they picked any of the 4, that would be an acceptable answer. Go and see it this weekend. It's officially out, unlike the last couple of movies where I've reviewed them and I don't think they're actually available to watch. John Wick is available as of today. Go check it out. Pick a good time to see it so you can talk about it with your buddies afterwards and really reminisce over what you've seen. Keanu Reeves, great. The world of the Baba Yaga, as they call him, is a truly wonderful place full of violence and gore and interesting characters and impressive world building and visuals. It's fantastic stuff. Love it. Great stuff. Well done. John Wick. Perfect franchise. There we are. Very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. I should be back next week for a normal episode. I will be doing another review soon, but not for a couple of weeks. So be sure to tune in for that. But otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed the last few movie reviews. For the most part, in fact, I would say all of them for the month of March have been very positive. They've been enjoyable, they've been fun, they've been exciting, they've been awesome, they've been surprising. So if you were to see any of them this month, you would not be disappointed, I think. If I had to rank them for you, I'd say go see Creed first, then John Wick, then Dungeons and Dragons, and then Shazam. But whatever, see whatever you want. I ain't your mother. But until next week, I love and appreciate you all. As always, thank you again for listening. I do appreciate it. And I'll catch you next time. Adios, muchachos.